Stewart, it's a great pleasure of mine to have you with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Now, I know that a lot of our listeners will probably be quite familiar with some of your works, and obviously with the history, the journey so far, we could say. But for those that are obviously new to your work, could we go back in time a little bit, perhaps right to the beginning, perhaps to your birth, Stewart, and kind of go into how that led you further into the Montauk Project? Because I know that from birth, things weren't exactly what you would call natural to speak. Is that okay, me using that context?
Well, that's putting it mildly, but I'll do better than that. I'll go back even further in time to tell you why it happened in the first place.
That'd be fantastic, yeah.
And in order to explain that, I need to let the audience know, and I'm sure many of them already do, that my great uncle was the first president of the Soviet Union. His name was Yakov Sverdlov. And in fact, he was the roommate of Stalin in the Gulag before the takeover. Mm-hmm. And my great uncle was the one who ordered the assassination of the Tsar and his family in Yekaterinburg in the Ural Mountains of Russia. And in honor of that command and the success of it, they renamed that city Sverdlovsk after my great uncle. And so because of that, there was a lot of political intrigue in my family. My grandfather, who was Yakov's brother, was sent to first Britain and then to the United States in order to form the Communist Party and to entice people back to the workers' paradise of the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother was a Soviet spy in World War II, but of course the audience may remember that at that time the U.S. and Britain and the Soviet Union were actually on the same side against the Nazis. And so because of that background, my family here in the United States was very much monitored because of loyalty issues, of course, especially during the Cold War and subsequently. And so because of that, during the early 50s, during the Korean War, my father was taken into an underground area of El Paso, Texas, where he was working for military projects, kept so secret even today, he won't talk about them. And when I was born, again, a very interesting story. When my mother went into labor with me, it was determined that she had no birth canal. And so therefore, they told her it was impossible for me to have been conceived. And so they had to perform surgery to create a birth canal and then literally pull me out of the womb so that I could be born.
I see.
And that, yeah, very odd story. And in fact, it was written up in the medical books because it was so odd. Interestingly, she was taken to an area of a hospital that was not even opened for business yet. There was not even heat at that time of the year. And it just happened, and I put that in quotes, to be a doctor from Texas who was expert in performing such surgeries. And if it wasn't for him, I would not have been born at all.
I see.
And so, of course, my whole life I was monitored, and my family was monitored by the United States government. And because of that, I was used in the Montauk Project from 1970 to 1983. Why was I chosen specifically? Because they were looking for someone with a particular range of genetics and mind pattern and energy field, and I was a convenience.
I see. It's amazing to hear this story, Stewart. It really is an eye opener, especially for those coming to this alternative research movement. Who are quite fresh to this information. You see, I mean, I know you've been telling your story for some time now, and obviously nowadays you're using your expertise as what you would call a hyperspace intuitive to help heal other people with mind control programming. Is this correct? Yeah.
Yes, well, it was a very long road because at Montauk, a lot of the abilities, exercises were used for very negative purposes, as you well know.
Yeah.
And so it was during a very long deprogramming process after that project ended. And then, of course, mostly my whole life, up until that point, I didn't know anything else. I had no idea how to, work in society, how to interact with people. Quite honestly, it was like coming onto, like being an alien on another world. I had no concept of what human civilization was like. And so the only thing that I could do was go, of course, through a program of deprogramming myself, and then to help others do the same thing, which is how I came to do my hyperspace work now.
I see. Stuart, if we can go back to the what you're calling an immaculate conception, clearly that was an incredible event, in you being conceived. I take it that was not, it wasn't the natural way you were conceived, as in, that you said that it was an impossibility that your mother could have been impregnated through sexual contact. That implies, obviously, another means of insemination, we could say. Could you kind of go through the motions of specifically what that could have been, what could have brought you about?
Well, I laugh a little bit when I hear immaculate conception because, certainly my life has not been exemplary of such a person. But what I was told years later during the deprogramming process, was that I was actually created in vitro and implanted in my mother's womb, even back in those days. That procedure, that type of procedure, was not common or publicly acknowledged until maybe the late 60s or the 70s. And of course, I was born in 1956. Of course, I do look much younger, but the government, the powers that be, whatever you want to call them, they have technology that they use, which is literally hundreds, if not thousands of years ahead of what they finally filter down to the public.
Yeah.
So that what we have now, as far as technology, the government had decades ago.
I see.
And so basically, just think of in vitro fertilization, and that was how I was created.
Okay. Would you say then you are part of a hybridization program and have been since birth?
That's what I have been told, correct. Apparently, they used the genetics of my parents, and they also mixed in other genetics. I have written about this in my autobiography, Montauk Alien Connection, where I describe the various components that were made up into my genetics. Of course, I cannot verify that or prove that to you or anyone, but This is what I have been told. And of course, my body itself is different because medical doctors over the years have told me that I have anomalous conditions in my body. For example, I have a different number of teeth in my jaw than a standard human being. I also have a skull size that is different than other human beings. I have an extra vertebrae in my neck. My lower spine and hip bones come together differently than a normal human being. And my body temperature is much lower than an average person. So there are various anomalies in my body that are proof physically that I'm not the same as the standard person.
I see. I wasn't aware of that. That's fascinating, Stuart.
Yes, but the other, there's a downside to everything. And I don't sleep hardly at all. I have very much difficulty in sleeping. My body temperature, I either am too hot or too cold. I'm never, at the right temperature. And so there are differences, and very often I have wished over the years to be like other people, but that's not going to happen.
Okay. So, Stuart, you say you were recruited for the Montauk Project. Did you you specified a date a little bit earlier? Believe that was 1970. You said, is that right?
That's correct.
1970 to 1983.
Yes, 1983 is when the project crashed.
Okay.
Abruptly, and so it was ended. It has started up again subsequent to that time in other locations and in different ways, but it was not the same as it was during those 13 years.
I see. Stewart, could you tell us a little bit about the role you played in the 13 years at Montauk, and then lead maybe into how the project itself crashed and how you managed to detach yourself from the operation?
Okay, it's a big story. I will tell you, though, Montauk base itself had already been established actually back in 1799, which was commissioned by George Washington when he built this underground area, a very small one, I will say, at Montauk Point, which is at the very eastern end of Long Island, where it juts out into the Atlantic Ocean. And he did this along with a light tower, for the ocean, that in case British invaded the U.S. at the time, and so he kept supplies there. Over the decades subsequent to that, they expanded the underground area to eventually 9 levels deep, and it actually broke through to a location where they uncovered a pyramid that had been buried underneath this area for millennia, and apparently of Atlantean technology, and they did find Atlantean technology inside this pyramid. That part of Montauk was actually the remnant of an ancient Atlantean archipelago that led up into the Atlantic Ocean to this location. So there's a lot about Montauk which is very mysterious. Even the Indians who lived in the area had their chief was called a pharaoh, identical to the Egyptian pharaoh. Their language and culture was different. There's a lot. I could go on for hours about that. But Montauk Project was basically about how a very small group of people, relatively, could control billions on the Earth. Because when you have maybe 200,000 or 300,000 people who are looking to control billions and billions, armies and weapons are not enough. The most logical thing you can do is to use mind control, because that way people will perform the functions you want them to and not realize what they're doing or why. And you may recall after World War II, during Project Paperclip, the U.S. and Britain brought a lot of Nazi scientists over to these countries and Canada as well, in order to continue physical and mental projects in order to accomplish their mind control goals. And in fact, they continued their experiments right after World War II, and they escaped the Nuremberg trials because of that. And quite honestly, that's still going on to this day in various locations around the world. In Britain, you have Tavistock, which is a continuation of these projects. And so Montauk was about genetic manipulation, esoteric weaponry, time travel, interdimensional connections, and they needed to create a person who could see into other realities without the use of a device, so that in effect the person himself would become the device. And of course they did have technology which was developed in Germany, as well as alien technology that had been exchanged or captured at various points during the previous decades that were used. And during my time at Montauk, and I got there when I was 13 years old, or 13 and a half years old, there were at times that I witnessed personally alien beings that were there. Not many different kinds, but there were various kinds that existed. And there were also scientists who spoke only German. There were Russian scientists and even Israeli scientists that I recalled seeing there.
I see.
And I was used initially for energetic purposes. In other words, they had a psychic. You may have heard about him. He was named Duncan Cameron. He was the lead psychic that was used on this, what they called the Montauk chair, which was technology from Sirius A. And this Montauk chair would capture the thoughts and energy of the person who was on it, and then a computer system would extrapolate or enhance those energetic thoughts and emotions, store them, and then amplify them and transmit them to a person, place, or thing as the controllers saw fit. I was part of a very large group of children that were used. Initially, they used people who they thought would be expendable. They used derelicts, they used orphans, foster children, people that would not be missed if they vanished for some reason. And so eventually, after they started going through this and realized that the genetics of these people weren't the best, they started to take the children of military people, authority figures, political people, entertainers, people who could advance their position by offering up as sacrifices their children, and this does happen in Illuminati culture. Well, to make a very long story short, I was one of those children that was taken in for that reason. But I became an anomaly, and the reason is that I survived it. 99.9% of the people, especially the children that went through these horrendous experiments and projects, did not make it. They never survived. They were fried, literally, inside and out by the microwave, ELF, the torture. They even had sexual ritual magic that would be going on there. And so I became an anomaly that I survived. And not only did I survive, but I would not retain the mask memories. In other words, when they would take someone and do a procedure, they would place a mask memory over it so the person would think it was a dream or something else happened. But I would not retain the mask memory. I could see and remember through it the actual event. And it became a disturbance to them as well as an anomaly, and forced them to do even more experiments on me so that they could understand what kind of person could reject the mask memory and how they could circumvent that. And so quite honestly, for many, many years, I was tortured in many, many different ways because of it. And yet I did survive, which was also. I did suffer in other ways. I did have ulcerative colitis, which meant I was bleeding internally from things that were done. I became physically blind because my optic nerves were rearranged so that I could only perceive energy. As I mentioned, they wanted the person to be like a machine, not a human being. And so for many years, I could only perceive the energy. In fact, for 29 years, I was physically blind. And it wasn't until December of 1999 that I had surgery to reconnect the way my optic nerves perceive physical reality. And then when they removed the bandages, and of course I didn't know what to expect if I could see at all after that. But what happened was, not only did I see the energy field, but I saw the physical reality as an overlay. So for listeners who want to understand what that's like, it's like when you have an overhead projector and you keep putting the different panes of pictures underneath on the projector over and over, and you layer them one on top of the other. That's kind of how I see. I see layers of energy and physical reality on top of it. And that's how I do my work now, is by looking at a person, looking at their energy, and looking at the various layers, both internally and externally, and see where corrections need to be made. And that basically, in a nutshell, is what the Montauk experience was like for me. I also was involved in time travel experiments where they did send me back in time. I also was sent to the Mars underground and to the Mars surface. I learned that what we have been taught about history and religion is completely false. It has nothing to do with the truth at all. I also learned that the universe is teeming with life. That there are literally millions of civilizations out there, and only recently has the government admitted to that, only in the last year or so, actually. And so in 1983, August 12th to be exact, there was a position where the lead psychic fell asleep on the Montauk chair, and he was not being monitored at the time. Why that happened, I don't know why he wasn't being monitored, but he wasn't.
Okay.
And during that time, he had a nightmare during his sleep state, and the chair picked up the energy of the nightmare and became or projected it into the physical reality and created this energetic monster of sorts that started tearing up the base. And so literally they had to smash and disconnect, abruptly all of the equipment in order to stop this transmission from continuing. And that, for all intents and purposes, brought an end to the Montauk Project as I knew it, August 12, 1983. And to those of us who were there, that day is, we call it Montauk Day.
I see.
Kind of like a private little holiday.
I see. Stewart, could you tell me about the technology there with the chair you've just mentioned? That sounds intriguing and highly sophisticated. Where would technology of this nature come from?
Yeah, it was very high technology, and it did come from Sirius A, and it is known that the civilization on Sirius A, the star system Sirius A, has the highest and most sought after technology in the known galaxy. Basically, if you think of a dentist's chair with these two protrusions coming around the sides of the head where the temples of your head would be, and then there were electrodes that were connected from that to your head, and it picked up your thoughts. It read them like electronic impulses that could be translated into computer language,
Okay.
and then stored and amplified as the programmers saw fit. And it could be manipulated. So, for example, if they told the psychic in the chair to imagine an elephant, he could think of an elephant, and an energetic one could be created. If they told him to think of a vortex between there and the underground base in Mars, he could create that, and then that could be energetically grounded and centered so that it would remain, usable for whatever their purpose was. The technology went by thought transmission. There was a way to actually imprint your thoughts, which were electromagnetic in nature, and translate that into computer programming that could then be enhanced and amplified and transmitted.
So the amplifications, the projections themselves, actually manifested into physical reality. Is that what you're saying, Stewart?
Yes, at first energetically. In other words, it was like a preliminary energetic outline or foundation of whatever it is they wanted to create.
Okay.
Also learn that by reducing the frequency vibration of that projection, it would become solid.
I see.
Very much like, in the Star Trek program on television, they had those computers that would create food or whatever it is they needed to manufacture. They could create it. It's very much like that.
I see. I mean, it sounds very much like that. It's fascinating stuff. Can we go back to the Mars base? You mentioned that obviously this computer projected a wormhole. Would you call it a wormhole, Stewart, that you would enter and time travel to the base of Mars through? Is that correct?
Yeah, well, the terminology was there was a difference between a wormhole and a vortex.
Okay.
A wormhole was a shortcut between 2 points within the same reality.
Right.
A vortex was a connection between two different realities.
Right.
So that was very specific in the project about what was being created. So between here and Mars would be a wormhole because it's the same reality.
Mm-hmm.
However, if they wanted to create a connection between here and Mars 10,000 years ago, that would be a vortex.
And they could do that with this technology?
Yes, because every point in time and space is unique. There are no 2 points in existence that have exactly the same vibrational rate. Mm-hmm. So if you know where you want to go and you know what the vibrational rate of that point is and you match it, then whatever it is you're matching it to will be instantly transmitted.
Gosh. Okay, so how would you determine the locations in terms of the signature vibrations? Is this trial and error, or do they have basically an overlook of the multi-dimensions of many realities?
Well, that's where the expendable people came in, quite frankly, because in the beginning was hit and miss. the alien technology, and I should say some of the civilizations they had interacted with did give them coordinates to some places. But of course, as you would expect, the government is never satisfied with what they have, and they want to find other places to go. And so basically, they would figure out a coordinate or estimate something and send a derelict through it and see if it got there. And that person who was sent would have a transmitter on them or a connector or a grounder that they could tap into. Some people wound up in solid rock. Some people wound up in deep space. Some people wound up at the bottom of a volcano. There was everything you can imagine for years that happened until they finally, fine-tuned their coordinates, and then they kind of knew where it was. And then what they would do is they would anchor that location with a device, again, of alien nature, that they could hook into all the time. So there'd be a constant link between point A and point B once they established the coordinates.
Yeah. Okay. The beings that you encountered at the Montauk Project, can you tell us a little bit about the different beings, different species perhaps, and just give us kind of an outline of the mentality that you would be dealing with, because clearly there's no morality in any of these type of beings that would be waging this type of stuff upon humanity, Stewart,
Well, I understand what you're saying, but from their perspective, they were doing what they felt was right for them. I guess it's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? The history is written by the victor, not the loser. Mm-hmm. And so the beings that we saw, the ones that were most common, I imagine, were the Sirians. I'd say I saw them the most. And when I say most common, it's not like they were all over the place. I would just see them now and then. It wasn't like you would just run into them all the time. They would just be occasional incidences. But the beings from Sirius A, they were very tall, 7 to 8 feet tall, very thin, very white skin, kind of elongated head with very, very icy blue eyes, very aquiline noses, thin mouth, pointed or thin ears, and they would wear either tight skin-fitting, I guess, spacesuits, for lack of a better term, or sometimes they wear these very loose-fitting robes, depending on the situation. They were extremely intelligent. They did not speak verbally. They only spoke mentally. They claimed to have been here since the beginning of our planet's history, that they had influenced the Egyptian and Atlantean civilizations, and basically owed allegiances to no one. They were very pragmatic, and they connected to whomever they felt would get them whatever they wanted. Another group that we would connect to were the Ontarians. The Ontarians looked very human, maybe a little bit shorter than the humans generally. They may be that 5'7", 5'8". They were a very male-dominated society. Females were used only for procreation. They claimed to have been responsible for the creation of the ancient Greek civilization, and that they were the ancient gods of Greece in ancient times, according to them. They were very brutal. They were the ones who initiated a lot of the sexual magic rituals. They were very good at torturing. I never cared for them at all. They, again, very male-dominated society, even sexually. Then there were the Reptilians, and there were, I'd say, several different versions that I saw of those. They were more like observers. They were involved in understanding the technology, giving ideas about what could be done with it. They were also very brutal. They claimed to be the original colonists or inhabitants of the Earth from the Draco star system. They had a hierarchy, which they said they had created most of the Asian civilizations from the Lemurian continent eons ago.
Okay.
There were several different kinds. One kind that I call the warrior kind. That was a larger one, very brutal. Quite honestly, not to be too graphic, they would eat people. I would actually, they would eat little children and babies. That's how horrible they were. They would also eat small dogs and cats. They're just absolutely quite incredible to observe. There were the tall white ones, or what they would call the elite ones. They had wings on their backs. They were very tall also, very powerful, also very icy blue eyes. And they would basically have all the others reporting to them. Interaction between humans and these beings I didn't observe very much. Mostly they were there as observers. I was not in any position of power there, so what I saw of them was only fleeting or in a ritual of some sort. There were also occasionally the little gray alien, the typical kind, but not too many of those, because apparently the gray race, or what people call the little grays, I've heard them say they're from Zeta Reticula, etc. They really are not a real group of beings. They are manufactured creation as a slave race by the reptilians. And so they were quite controlled, mind controlled as well. Their bodies were completely manipulated. If you take the picture of a gray and you put it against the picture of a developing human fetus, you cannot tell the difference. And the reason is that most of them are fetuses grown to larger proportions and then mind controlled. And that's why they have hormonal deficiencies and digestive deficiencies, because they're basically undeveloped humans with genetics of reptilians as well.
I see.
There was another group that was not frequent, but I saw only a couple of times, and that was the ones claiming to be from Tau Ceti. The ones from Tau Ceti also very human-looking, kind of stocky, kind of Slavic-looking, and they were the ones who claimed to have developed the Eastern European races. They hated the reptilians and the Greys. They said that their star system had been attacked by the Greys and reptilians, and that their children had been taken and murdered, and that they have an agenda of scouring the galaxy looking for reptilians and Greys and killing them. And so they were very, very hostile towards the other participants, if you will. But if you think of it, they were actually more of a humanist, because they had human interests in mind and not abuse.
Yeah. So there was quite a lot of conflict between the different extraterrestrial races in the actual facility itself, yeah?
Absolutely. And bringing that up as a point, I want to say that what we learned there and what we were actually told is that the universe is quite a hostile place. It's not love, light, and peace out there, contrary to what people, especially New Age people, think. There are wars constantly going on out there in space. We have seen the remnants of it on our moon. We have seen the remnants of it on Mars and even into deep space. They are constantly fighting against one another. There's not unity at all out there. As they say, as above, so below. The reason why there's so much conflict on Earth is because we were created by those from out there, and they put their conflicts in us. And that's what we are unfortunately experiencing.
I see. Stuart, I'd like to go back again. I find it really intriguing, the fact that you've actually travelled to an underground base on the planet Mars. Did you say you've been on the surface also of the planet Mars?
Yes, and I wrote about that in my autobiography, Montauk Alien Connection. Earth, Mars, planets that were created by being ejected from a star like the sun and then hardened. These kind of planets are hollow inside.
Okay.
When they spin in space as the molten material is ejected from the star, the centrifugal force of the spin causes the molten material inside to move towards the sides and then become ejected at polar openings that develop as the material starts to move. And then the coldness of space hardens the external part of the then spherical object, and then because of the openings, the inside is then hardened, and then there's molten material that remains suspended in the middle, which acts kind of like an internal sun in the center of the planet. And so basically you have a surface world and an internal world, and in between the inner and outer mantles is this magma that's trapped between the two hardened surfaces, and there are caverns and tunnel systems that develop between the inner and outer mantle that go through the magma and mantle. And so that's what these planets are like, and in fact it's more common to have planets like that than not. And so there are these underground areas. In fact, we learned that the inner Earth was developed way before the external Earth, because apparently the surface of the Earth in the very beginning was covered in fluid with water, and only the inside of the Earth was open and available for life to form. And that is where a lot of the artifacts that we find deep in coal mines come from, basically, not from the surface, but from the inner world. And so anyway, yes, they did establish a link between the Earth and the inside of Mars and even the surface of Mars. We learned that Mars was once a very flourishing planet, very much like the Earth. It had the remnants of human civilization on there that were from the Sirian star system. I haven't spoken about that, but basically most of humanity in our galaxy is a remnant of the Sirian star system that was attacked by the reptilian Dracos, and the refugees fled to other star systems to establish new worlds, and that's basically a lot of what's out there.
And this information here on the galactic history, you learned this when you were actually at the Montauk facility, is that correct?
That's correct, and of course that was given to us by, or I should say given to the government by their connections to alien civilizations that they had connected to way before even 1947 Roswell event.
Right. And you were indoctrinated with this information. They would tell you that what they were doing was for the good of man, I believe. Man was not in a position where he could look after himself, and what they were doing was right for the civilization on Earth. Yeah?
Well, basically we were told that what we were doing was a very courageous and humanistic thing, because human beings were just, frankly, according to them, too stupid to control themselves and needed to be controlled. Otherwise, it would lead to disaster on our Earth. You know, they said human beings could not handle freedom, and that there were inner conflict within them, and that they would always fight amongst each other. And so what we were doing, helping to mind control them, was in effect helping them and saving them.
Gosh, it really is outlandish, isn't it, Stewart?
Yes, it is outlandish.
Hmm.
But
Okay.
you know what, Matthew, is that if you look at the world,
Yeah.
and you look at the, you know, sometimes I wonder, you know, if mankind was left to its own devices, what would they do?
I often think the same thing myself, Stewart. There's a lot of people that are relying on the enemy, you know. A lot of people shouting and screaming about the enemy, and really not coming with any kind of solutions for a better world if things were different, if you know what I mean, Stewart.
Yes, I understand.
So that's maybe something that you know, we need to have a look at en masse, what we're actually doing to positively better ourselves. And I think that's where your work comes in, isn't it, Stewart, with regards to the work you do with the colours and the symbolism and whatnot?
Yes, because, you know, human beings really only use 10% or less of their total brain capacity. And what's even more amazing is that they use only 3% or less of their DNA capacity. So can you imagine the abilities of mankind as a species and as individuals if we were to open up even a percentage more of what we have available to us? It would be quite incredible.
Yeah.
You know, and if the control systems were removed and people were allowed to connect to the oversoul and God mind within, then we would have quite a wonderful civilization. And that's my goal. That's what I'm trying to do, is to help people achieve that.
Yeah. Yeah, people really do need to reconnect. So you call it the oversoul. You're talking about the higher self, I take it there.
Well, again, matter of semantics. Oversoul is the umbrella consciousness of all that you are, and it has many life streams that come from it.
Okay.
So within those life streams are higher selves or more advanced selves that are still part of the oversoul gestalt, if you will.
I see. Stewart, I'd like to ask your views on hallucinogenics, such as psilocybin mushrooms, for instance. These apparently enhance the type of reality that you're experiencing. Some have actually kind of said that they felt they may have been opening higher realms of vibration in terms of possibly hyperspace, as you speak of. Do you see any relationship between these higher vibratory locations and the mushrooms themselves when consumed?
Well, I will tell you that I have an aversion to those narcotics, if you will. Basically, they were used for programming and mind control, and still are. The experiences that people have, I think, can be somewhat misconstrued or misunderstood. They may have entered into their own programming matrix from using them and not realized it. They also open up their energy fields to the lower astral and could be easily attached or connected by demonic entities, and I have seen that happen. These mushrooms and even ayahuasca and other so-called hallucinogens that can also do damage the liver, kidneys, and brain. I have seen people who've taken these things and never come back to normal from it. I have spoken to so many people who've had very negative experiences with these, even especially people I've spoken to in Britain. So quite honestly, the best narcotic you can have is your own mind. To me, those are crutches. They take away your ability to use what you have naturally within you. And so I tell people that, they can do what they wish, but in order to achieve true spirituality and connections to God mind, you need to use the mind that you have that's connected to it, and not use external substances that are, kind of throw you out there into the astral. You don't know where you're going.
I see. And were these type of substances used at Montauk? Was there mushroom programming within the Montauk Project?
Well, they use derivatives of many different things there. A lot of German Nazi formulas, let's say, were used and injected into people. Many of them never survived it. So no, drugs were used, narcotics absolutely were used, especially when they would have events of sexual magic ritual where these things were ingested and used.
Okay.
But quite honestly, my opinion and observation was that it was detrimental to the physical body, and it made the mind go to places that it could not control itself. It was kind of like being ejected out of a cannon, and where you landed, that's where you were.
Yeah. Okay. So, Stewart, when the 13 years that you spent at Montauk finally came to an end, and this event that you mentioned earlier took place, whereby which this entity was projected, and the only way that it clearly could be stopped was to smash the facility to bits. Is that basically what you said? Yeah.
Basically correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, at that point, were you within the Montauk facility?
No, I was not there at the time that it happened.
I see. So, how did it come about that you were aware of the fact that everything had kind of shut down and that things were kind of changing?
It literally felt like someone pulled the plug out from me. All those years, it was like I was hooked in to the energy and systems of Montauk Project. That was my life. When all of a sudden, it was just came to an end. I cannot explain it. It's kind of like, being in a dream and then suddenly being jolted awake and you don't know where you are, what happened to you. I literally felt the energy leave my body. I literally felt like I was unplugged from the outlet, and all the energy in me just drained out, and I was completely useless for a very long period of time. And this happened to many people who were survivors or who were still around at the time when it happened. They didn't know how to move forward. They felt as if they had no direction. Many of them became alcoholics. Many became drug addicts. Many of them became criminals. A lot wound up in prisons and mental institutions. Many committed suicide. Personally, myself, I became an alcoholic. I was placed then on Prozac and other narcotics that made me try to commit suicide 3 times. I mean, I wrote about this in my autobiography. It was a very, very horrendous time period. And only after a long time of deprogramming that I was able to get some kind of a semblance of a life and interact in society. It took quite a number of years.
I see. And the deprogramming process itself, Stewart, did you have others helping you to deprogram, or was it a case of your natural abilities, you started utilizing them for the positive of yourself,
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I will not use the word help in deprogramming because basically, again, I have to make a very long story short. I really searched for someone to assist me in my dilemma. And unfortunately, the ones that did come to, quote, help me, unquote,
okay,
they were working for the government and basically tried to deprogram me for my own purposes, to get information that they thought I was because they figured I was going to commit suicide or die, so they tried to get everything out of me beforehand. There were times I was left in a heap on the floor with hypothermia after a deprogramming session because, that was all they could get out of me for that day. And over time, I realized no one's going to help me. That the only way I'm going to get myself back is to help myself. And so I use the techniques that I learned at Montauk, take lemons and make lemonade. And I turned them into my own brand of deprogramming techniques that did help. So in a way, I have to thank the ones who abused me and deprogrammed me for their purposes because they showed me what not to do and how a deprogramming process could actually hurt people. So I have developed methods that are actually beneficial and keep the person in charge instead of the deprogrammer. And I teach this, and it's in my books and DVDs as well.
And you can find those on your website, can't you, Stewart? Do you want to plug the website?
Sure, why not? Expansions.com. We have a brand new website up, which is really amazing. We have everything you can imagine there that you would need, a one-stop shop. Please sign up for our free newsletter, which you can get right as a pop-up on the homepage. It's expansions.com, and I have daily news. I have information there every single day and a free newsletter.
Okay, great stuff. Stewart, in regards to programming, I've listened to some of your previous interviews, and you mentioned there may be programming still within yourself that hasn't been opened up yet or activated, and that there may come a time where this is kind of opened up, activated. Would you be aware that had been opened up within yourself at that point, and would you have something to counteract it with in terms of your healing remedies?
Yes, anybody who tells you that they are completely 100% deprogrammed is lying to you. So that I will tell you right away.
Okay.
I have not yet met one person on this earth who's 100% deprogrammed, including myself. The good thing is, for me, is I have been doing my deprogramming now for over 20 years, and I got a good chunk of it out, and I know my triggers, and I know what activates me. So when I feel a trigger coming on, or I know that I'm being bombarded, I know what to do to circumvent that, to block it, etc. Now, yes, there are times when I do go over the edge, and I do go into my programming mode, but fortunately, I have my wonderful wife Janet, who says, "Hey, you know what? You're triggered right now. You got to do something about it," and she does help me out with that. So I'm fortunate to have someone who's also wise about it and can monitor me and watch me and see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So that's a very good thing. But yes, the techniques do work when you use them, and you have to be consistent. You can't just do it once in a while. You know, it's like physical exercise. The more you do, the better the results. While mental exercise is even more important. And deprogramming, I have said as an analogy, is like a mental archaeological dig. You can't just stick the shovel in and start digging because you're going to damage something. Mm-hmm. It has to be layer by layer by layer, very slowly, because you're uncovering your own mind, and you want to keep all of the pieces intact and reintegrate them. And so it is an effort, and you have to be ready to make that effort. But if you don't, where does that lead you? And we're now in a time, end time programming, which is happening right now. We're in it right now. And so everything that's in everyone is activated and running. And every person on this planet at this point has some kind of programming in them. So it's very paramount. It's paramount that everyone do their work.
Most definitely. Stewart, the end time programming you've just mentioned, could you go into that a little bit? Are we in the end times, in your opinion, first of all?
Oh, not just in my opinion, but in fact, in actuality. End time programming, if you want to read the script, just read the book of Revelation, which was written by the Illuminati themselves and stuck into the New Testament, which is completely rewritten, by the way. It's nothing to do with the Word of God.
Yeah.
And so basically we're living in a time when there'll be earthquakes and volcanoes and signs in the heavens and everything that it says in that book. The Illuminati are going to make sure that they recreate that for us, so that people will say, hey, just what the book of Revelation said, that's what's going on right now. It must be true. And that's when they have the staged alien invasion, the staged second coming of Christ. They invoke the New World Order. There's an entire agenda which is now in process. And quite frankly, the whole 2012 story, the Mayan prophecies, has nothing to do with Mayan prophecies. In fact, the Mayans laugh at what people think the Mayan prophecies are about. The world's not coming to an end on December 21st, 2012. In fact, the Mayan priests said on December 22nd, 2012, they'll be getting up and making their coffee and watching TV like they always do.
Yeah.
And they said that quite, frankly. The agenda of 2012 is about the timetable for the Illuminati, the New World Order, to have completely consolidated their hold on the earth and mankind, and move forward from there. That's what 2012 is about.
Yeah. Okay. And you just mentioned about the holograms in the sky, for instance, the projections of the cross, things like that. This is all part of Project Bluebeam, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Project Bluebeam can project holographic images into the atmosphere and even into space and onto the ground, so that you think you see something that may not really be there. This is very old technology. In fact, in 1961, a U.S. submarine tested it and surfaced off of the coast of Havana Harbor in Cuba and projected the image of the Virgin Mary over the city of Havana, in the hopes of making the new communist regime think that the second coming was on its way and they need to give up their government.
Yeah.
So that's how old the technology is. It's so advanced now that the images can be picked up on radar as if they were solid objects. The sound can be produced as well. And in fact, the Japanese have enhanced it so much that they can project an image into your room or into your space, and you can touch that image and it will feel real, even though it's a holographic image.
Gosh. Does this tie in your opinion, with, firstly, are you aware of Benjamin Creme?
I've heard of it, yes.
Okay, well, Benjamin Creme speaks about claims of the second Christ coming and contact with this higher being, and Me and a friend of mine, we were out having a walk one day, and we noticed what appeared to be a holographic projection, a little bit like the Batman symbol when you see, this holographic bat on the wall kind of coming out from a beam of light. It was like that, but with kind of a star in the middle, a star or a cross. It was kind of warped, the inside of it, you see. Now, I did a brief search on Google and put something along the lines of stars or crosses in circles, and it immediately brought up Benjamin Crem's website, and this was the only location online I could find images of these projections. A little bit of background on Benjamin Crem has revealed he does have kind of ties with the Illuminati. Would you say that the images that we were seeing, and I have seen them a couple of occasions, to be honest with you, Stu, would you say that they are something to do with the Project Bluebeam itself?
Yes, absolutely, because that's what kind of thing they're going to project into the sky all over the world, and depending on the particular culture, will depend on what particular image they project into the atmosphere. They will produce a physical body that will claim to be the second coming of Christ, and when they check the genetics, it will match with the blood genetics on the Shroud of Turin, which has recently been reissued, if you will, back for display. And the Israeli scientists at Hebrew University somehow got a piece of that shroud and determined that there were pollen samples in it that could have only come from ancient Israel 2,000 years ago. So in effect, they kind of verified that the shroud is authentic. And I know there's been stories about it's really one of the leaders of the Templars, and it's a fake from the Middle Ages and all of this. But they also recently found out that on the back of the shroud, there's a second image of a face. So it looks like there's a face on the front and a face on the back. And they said that could have only come from radiation. So basically they're saying that the technology to produce this didn't exist back then, so it can only be real.
Right.
And so therefore, if it's real, the blood stains and samples on the shroud must also be real, and the DNA can be reconstituted even though it's been dead for 2,000 years.
I see. And do you think possibly that they have a role for you to play in the Project Bluebeam? Maybe some programming that's to be opened up? Does this in any way come into your mind at all, ever?
Of course, I think about that all of the time. Whenever I see something triggering me, I say, okay, this is something I have to work on, because that's not going to happen to me. Yeah, I'm sure that there's stuff in me. When the government people were deprogramming me, they were nice enough to tell me that not to worry, no matter how badly I may be tortured by others, I could never reveal what was time sensitive within me, so that I could just be tortured to death and never, be able to stop my torturers. Those were kind of them to tell me. But, however, I have really gone very deep into my programming. I know what's in there. I know there's stuff that's still buried, and I'm working on all of it. And as I mentioned earlier, I am aware of what triggers me. I absolutely know it. Yeah. And I monitor that, and so does my wife.
Okay, your views on the Earth being quarantined, Stewart. We've come across information that has led us to believe this could be a possibility, that the Earth was in fact quarantined many thousands of years ago, back when there was the battles of Atlantis and Lemuria. What is your take on this, and does this have any relationship to what's going on in the Kuiper Belt?
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't quite use the word quarantined.
Okay.
I would use perhaps, blockaded internally. Basically, the only ones that have quarantined us are the Illuminati themselves. They determined back in the 60s, I should say late 60s, early 70s, that there was only a handful of races that they were willing to interact with, and the others not. And so back in 1967 or 8, I believe, the U.S. Air Force was issued a pamphlet with a list of 70 different races on it, with the orders to shoot down if they were to see vehicles with those descriptions. The last information I got on that was in the late 90s, and that was up to 117 different species that were, shoot to kill if you see them. They only really allow, as I mentioned, just a few these species in there. Of course, in the U.S., there's a law on the books that says that no U.S. citizen can have interaction with an ET. It also says that no U.S. citizen can have unsupervised interaction with a dolphin. So
Really?
it gives you an idea of what they consider dolphins to be. But if you notice, again, semantics, it doesn't say alien, it says ET. And they were very specific in government with terminologies. An alien, as legally in the United States, is a physical being from another physical world in our physical universe. It can be monitored when it enters into our planet.
Mm-hmm.
An ET could be a non-physical entity from another or parallel universe that can bleep in and out of our reality. So therefore, not easily monitored. That's why it's illegal for a U.S. citizen to have connection to such a being, because it can't be supervised. So we have a lot of different scenarios going on here. So the ETs, if you will, can bleep in and out at will because no one stops them or can't stop them. Aliens can be blockaded, and we have seen videos on television, even from NASA, from satellites that show UFOs being fired upon, even from the Earth. So there's wars going on even all around us that human beings are not aware of. Now, going to the Kuiper Belt situation, and that is a whole nother category of a situation going on. There is a massing of vehicles out there, literally surrounding our solar system, and I can say from that perspective there's a quarantine going on. And I also will say that there's movement happening now after several years. I believe that they're up to something now, and I believe that they're sabotaging a lot of what's happening on the Earth. I feel like in the last few weeks and months, certain things that have happened on the Earth have been directly instigated from Kuiper Belt. So that's a whole nother situation going on. There are many, many players, if you will, taking part in this end time scenario, and it gets very complicated.
I see. Stewart, you talk about a download also of a night between, was it the hours of 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock a.m.? Is that correct?
2 a.m. and 5 a.m.
2 a.m. and 5 a.m. Where is this coming from, this download, and how does it work? Could you give us a kind of breakdown of the mechanics for those that, as I say, are new to your work, Stewart?
Yeah. Back in the 1980s, President Reagan made an announcement that said he was so happy to say that the entire planet was now ringed with satellites, completely surrounding the planet, so that nowhere on Earth was considered to be remote or isolated any longer. What he failed to say was that the reason the satellites were ringing the Earth was so that they could monitor the movement of every living thing on the planet, bombarded with ELF and microwave pulses, and transmit mind control waves. And so that's what's going on the planet right now. The entire world is surrounded, and there's also a ground amplifier of cell tower, microwave tower, television, radio, etc. All of these things amplify the mind control waves and can beam them to a specific person or to a general area. And so I'm not sure if I'm answering your question properly, but basically the world is being controlled externally and internally at the same time. There are different factions now, or have been, within the control groups, if you will. Some of them fight amongst each other. Some of them have decided that what's going on is not right, and they're trying to sabotage the others. So there's wars or internal battles going on even within those trying to control us.
Okay.
I think it's a good, that's a good thing actually, because as these battles occur, cracks open in the system that we can slip through and widen the cracks and break it even further.
Yeah. Okay. Stuart, just back to the download question I asked you about sleep. Is it that when you're in the sleep state, you're more susceptible to the waves that are being transmitted? And you're kind of, not aware consciously that these are being transmitted to yourself, and upon awakening, perhaps these are decoded and projected into your own behavior. Is that how it works, or have I got the wrong end of the stick there, Stuart?
No, you're kind of accurate. They chose 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. in every time zone because that is when they felt most of the population would be sleeping, or a good percentage of the population would be asleep. And yes, when you are asleep, your soul personality does leave the body and leaves you vulnerable. And so it's very easy then to connect to the brain of those sleeping people. The carrier waves mimic the brain waves, so it's kind of piggybacking on the brain wave. So the person thinks that it's their own thoughts when in fact it's been added to their own thoughts. What happens is during that 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. period of time, most people find that they need to wake up, or they have a nightmare. Something happens where they wake up, and the reason is when you change the level of consciousness from sleep state to awake state, it downloads the transmission. It sets it in so that it can function. And that is why people wake up during that time period. You see? And so if you keep yourself in violet protection, which I teach how to use violet protection, ultimate protection, and then you surround yourself with a mirror, mentally create a mirror on the outside of that violet, anything coming towards you is then reflected away, and anything that penetrates that energetic mirror is then filtered by the violet, and then you can retain your integrity. The violet is a color of your crown chakra and has a function. Every color has a function, and the function of violet is to filter and protect energy. That's why it's at the crown, because your body is like an energy bottle, and the crown is the cap, and you want to make sure that the cap is on securely. So if you take that violet secure energy and surround yourself with it, you basically keep yourself in a protected envelope.
I see. Interesting. So more of this information on protection and different color techniques and whatnot can all be found in the Hyperspace Helper. Is that the name of the booklet? Yeah.
Yes, I have a Hyperspace Helper, Healer's Handbook. I have DVDs on the subject. I have a wide range of products that talk about it. Okay.
And I was listening to an interview of yours recently also, Stuart, that there was a question that was asked. It was relative to the number 11 and also 13. Now, is there a significance in a case of looking at the clock, throughout pretty much every day and seeing that the 1s and 3s are pretty much all you see on the clock? For instance, it could be, 13, 11, 11, 13, and different variations of the two, but, being significantly 1s and 3s each time you look at, different clocks and whatnot. What is the significance there, Stuart?
Yes, a lot of people write in about that, especially 1111, that kind of thing. When you have a 1 or an 11, that is a mind control trigger to activate a new function. It means open up new function. A 3 is a completion or a formulation or creation of that new function. So it kind of sets it in. And there's also a lot of people who are seeing 4s. 4 represents a physical manifestation of the function. So it usually represents, when you see a 4, that you're going to physically do something to complete a function that's been activated in you. All of the numbers, numerologically speaking, have their own inherent meaning. But from a programming perspective, those same numbers are used to trigger functions within the programming matrix. They could even be used in a sequence to activate a specific alter within that programming matrix, or could be a trigger or a cue for you to perform some kind of a function. It would be different for each person what that function may be. And it may be different for a particular ethnic group or region of the planet for what they need for that particular purpose. It really just depends on that individual.
I see. And I mean, we're talking in general here, you know, just looking at the clock and seeing these numbers here. So what you're saying kind of implies that there's a highly intelligent kind of power at work here. You know, for obviously to kind of see these numbers at regular intervals on the clock and that be activating some kind of programming within yourself, it really brings a mass complexity to just existence, doesn't it?
Yes, you know, remember that programming, although relatively new to our planet, you know, relatively speaking, it's ancient. You know, there's an estimate that some of the programming techniques are almost 1 billion years old. There's civilizations out there that are 1 billion years old. So you can imagine how they have developed this. Your programming, the people that have programming in their mind patterns, there is a program within it, a subroutine, that makes you become aware of those numbers at specific times.
Right.
Even when you are asleep, you are aware, you are conscious. Many people have a sleep alter. You might see people who sleep when their eyes are a little bit open, and it looks like they're awake, but they're really not awake. Mm-hmm. That's a sleep alter. And many of us have that, especially people who are specifically programmed. And so as a way of enhancing the programming, you're programmed to be aware of the clock and the numbers and look at them when they're a certain time so that it keeps the programming active. And that's a very general program that that pervades most people consciousness.
Mm. I mean, that gives me that's a bit of a better explanation for me personally there. Thank you for that, Stewart. It makes a little bit more sense. Hearing it on the last interview, I couldn't quite grasp what you know the concepts of the programming behind the numbers. But thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So yeah, in regards to the Norway spiral, something else I wanted to ask you, Stewart. That's seems to be you know, tied in with the blue beam projections as well, according to your research. Am I right in what I'm saying there?
Yes, and in fact, there was an image on the internet a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago, that actually showed the image of a satellite behind the spiral. You could actually see the outline of a vehicle of some sort hanging in space, projecting this thing out. So that was quite fascinating to me. And it was shortly, I believe, right after that those images appeared over the Kremlin in Moscow, right, of these vehicles that were hanging over there. Now, supposedly, next week, or very shortly, there's going to be a repeat over Moscow of UFOs that will be visually seen by people in broad daylight, supposedly. Mm-hmm. Now, this will be followed, apparently, the following week by the same kind of display over London. So this is supposed to be their way of letting people know that aliens exist and bringing the staged alien invasion to the forefront, etc. And we're seeing more and more of this happening all over the world.
And where is that information coming from, Stewart?
Information for what now?
You just said supposedly this will be happening in the near future. What's your source for that information?
Well, there is a person who is stating that he has inside information that the government is being forced to reveal this type of information to the public. Mm-hmm. And so to make sure the government does this, they are creating images of UFOs over those two major cities. And then there'll be images over other cities globally that could not be denied of what they are. Very much like we saw last summer in China, where these UFOs literally closed an airport and weren't able to, aircraft wasn't able to take off. So we're going to see more and more of this as the alien information is being imprinted into the public. They want people to now be aware of it, to believe that aliens exist, but they also want them to believe that aliens could attack us. They need people to believe that there will be an alien invasion, that we are in danger. In that way, force all nations to come together under one global government to fight this enemy that we can't see.
Okay. And then what is the agenda from there? Once the Project Bluebeam has commenced, and you know, the invasion, the falsified invasion, the, you know, simulation has gone forward and whatnot. What is their intention for humanity in regards to, say, 2013, 2014 onwards? I mean, you've highlighted that they're trying to kind of turn humanity into almost a cyborg culture.
Yeah.
But what is the what is the agenda for mankind in terms of his functions in their opinion and their vision?
Well, to complete the agenda, they will have a savior race come to vanquish these evil aliens who are attacking the Earth. This savior race will then be revealed to be reptilian, who will say that they are actually our ancestors and show us that we ourselves have reptilian DNA and we're part of them. Then that will be followed up by the second coming of Christ, who will proclaim the New World Order as his new holy empire and impose a new world religion, which everyone must believe in. And then everyone will be given a function. You know, depending on their programming, their genetics, etc., every single person will have a function from which they cannot deviate, and the world will basically be, you know, a huge slave race where no one asks any questions. You believe in one religion. You have the government. You have the aliens who are controllers. They are our mommy and daddy who created us, and so they have to be benevolent. And so that's what we'll have, a society of Borgs, if you will. Each one performing their function, no deviation, no questioning. You know, CNN tells you, you know, X, Y, and Z, and then that's the truth to you. And that's the end of the story. And it's kind of like that now.
Yeah, not quite as harsh, but yeah, I can see where you're coming from with that, Stewart. Do you think this is going to be the case, or do you think that there's enough people waking up, doing positive mental exercises, searching for the higher selves themselves, and you know, doing what they can to kind of stop this? What's your opinion on what's to come? Do you think that it's kind of going to sway that way in regards to their agenda, or do you think that humanity is strong enough to break through this and reclaim our souls, you know?
I feel and I see more and more people questioning, you know, even in the United States, which is totally mind controlled. I can see people saying, hey, you know, that just doesn't seem right. For example, you know, when the TSA and the airports were telling you to go into these radiation generating X-ray machines or be groped, you know, people were complaining about that. So I was like, oh, good, you know, someone's saying no. Of course, didn't change anything, but at least people were saying they don't like it. I do feel one thing the Illuminati did not take into consideration, and that is when people are really, really pushed against the wall, they're going to push back.
Yeah.
You know? And they may not know why or what the result will be, but they're not going to just sit there and take it. So that's the positive thing I see happening. It's not you know, happening a lot, but it's starting to happen. And I really think, quite honestly, with Kuiper Belt interference and other interference that's going to be happening on this planet, that people will really say, you know, they don't believe what they're being told. And so, yes, I do think there's hope. I think that things will not work out the way the Illuminati wish them to work out. I think that they are basically going to be vanquished from the earth eventually. And then mankind will have to start all over again, claiming who and what they are. But yes, I do feel there's hope, and I do feel that things will change ultimately. Maybe not next week or next year, but eventually people will start to not take the imposition of the harsh conditions.